Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're back with another video for The Last Kingdom, the board game, published by Gamelyn Games, and I want to say a big thank you to them for giving me this game so I can also paint these miniatures. We're going to paint two figures today, and they're both allies in the game. They're called King Alfred, which is one of the main characters, really beautiful, and also Odda the Elder, and he was a very prominent figure in the first series. I'm not going to say anything more than that in case you haven't watched this series, which is on Netflix right now, and I highly recommend the series, and also of course the books written by Bernard Cornwell. So let's get to it. We're going to start with King Alfred, and I'm going to use most of my inspiration from the card art. I'm going to put them over here just for you to see. Hopefully they won't fall apart, and maybe they will be a little bit too obscured, but the focus here is of course the miniatures. So here's King Alfred. King Alfred has a kind of like a very solemn look as from the card art. So we're going to start with a contrast color here, and we're going to start it with his robe, which is Citadel's contrast range Blood Angels Red. So give it a good shake to make sure that the pigments from the color is all the way mixed up. And then we're going to apply it to his robe. Now, this is a very fluid color, and as if you've followed my channel for a while, you know that contrast colors are a perfect way to color a model very quickly. So I'm going to use a kind of medium brush for this one. So with this one, I'm going to apply it on a fairly even layer on for the robe here. If you make mistakes, don't worry, we can fix it later. But try to make sure that you only cover the robe here. If you don't have a contrast color, any red color, a gory dark red would be quite nice, because it's kind of a burgundy color. It's kind of mixed in with brown. So if you think this one is too bright, we can always darken it in a little bit more later on with a dry brush. So also try not to touch the sword scabbard here if you can. But of course the upper part here as well needs to be colored. And King Alfred is one of my favorite characters in the series. He's often at odds with Uhtred of Bebbanburg, which is the main character, played by Alexander Draymond. And he's a very, very prominent figure in English history as well. He's known as Alfred the Great, or King Alfred the Great actually. And he's the one that they say founded England in many aspects. Or at least the idea of a unified England came into that's what they say. He started that. England wasn't unified under his reign, but the idea took place. Until then, he was a leader of the Wessex faction, which is a Saxon faction, and Wessex is one of the places and one of the factions in Last Kingdom, the board game as well. Last Kingdom, the board game is an unusual board game in that way. It's not like a typical war game where you fight and whoever is the winner. You will score victory points based on whose side is winning and whose side you are on, or whose side you're betting on, and that's a unique way in terms of like getting points in a conflict game. Because normally you just say like, oh, I won this fight, I'm the winner, I get the points. No, you don't. So you can switch allegiance in this game, and switching allegiance is a big part of this game, because when you switch allegiance, you may actually get those points and snag those points before anyone else, which is really nice. You see I'm painting here, I'm painting around the sword. I'm making a few mistakes here. I'm touching his forearm here, his elbow, but it's almost, and that's also what I can say is it's the negative aspect of this contrast paint, because it's very fluid and it's easy to make mistakes, but it also acts as wash as well. So you can skip the wash part later on as well for this part. And I'm going to go back and forth from the models a little bit. For now, that's the robe. I'm going to clean the brush in between my paint pot here. I'm going to wipe it off on a piece of kitchen towel here off camera to make sure that the brush is nice and clean as well. And while we're doing that, while this one dries a little bit, we're going to go over to Odda the Elder, because there is an Odda the Younger as well in the series. And for that one, let me see here if I can switch this one back. There you go. Sorry for my hand there. Then I'm going to paint his cloak, because it's a blue cloak with a contrast Citadel color contrast range Ultramarine's blue. Again, giving it a good shake. Make sure those pigments are not at the bottom of the color. Of course, closing my paint pot before I move on, in case I might spill it. And painting his cloak similar in the way that I painted King Alfred's. His figure is slightly easier to paint, so if you're new to this one, this is a perfect color to actually practice your skills on. I have to say as well that the figures don't come in this color originally. I primed them using a color called, it's a huge bottle here, I'm aware of that. It's a huge bottle called Surface Primer White from Vallejo. I'm using this huge bottle because I tend to use a lot of primers, 200 milliliters or 6.76 ounces. It lasts a long time, and it's one of the best primers I think there is out there because it leaves a very nice even coverage of the miniature. Please keep in mind that when you do prime a miniature, leave the paint to dry for at least 12 hours because that means the paint will kind of set into the miniature and make it so that you don't really have to use that much paint when you paint it originally or later on. So that's a really good point for putting the primer. It also means that the paint will actually stick to the plastic as well, or resin, in case you have resin models. So don't worry about in case you see that there's kind of like a little bit of uneven coverage here, but try to avoid the hands here if you can. And thing is with Odda is that you have the entire, you can see here, you can see it here, so I can bring it up here a little bit closer to you. It's more or less the entire figure in blue. And the reason for this is that according to the card art, that's what he has. But that means his face is going to be more accentuated. And we are going to we're going to try to make sure that there's going to be a color variation between the inner cloak and the outer cloak. Moving up here to his... Now, Odda the Elder is a fairly balded man, so you don't really have to worry about the hair color as well. But I do find that it's quite grey because he's an older guy. I have no prejudice about this, just that's what it is from the series and from the card art. And of course you can paint him whatever you want. I'm just trying to get him to look as similar as I can to the series. Okay, so that's Odda. I'm going to put Odda aside for a moment, leave Odda to dry a little bit, and of course clean the brush in between. And now Alfred has had a little bit time to dry. It's not entirely dry yet. So we're going to actually give his inner cloak a little bit of different color at least. And for it's in the cloak, it's a little bit different because it's kind of like a woolen beige color. You could possibly use ivory for this, or some kind of grey cloak. I've opted to use a color, move this one aside again, green grey from Vallejo, that I found to be almost or close to the art and the series as possible. You can't really see it here in the art, except for if you look it up here in the corner of his neck, that you can see something like that. But I'm going to try to apply it, and I also don't want the entire figure red as well. So that means I'm painting over my mistake here that I made before from painting the cloak. And I recommend putting maybe 1 or 2 layers. It's a very, very subtle effect from the primer. Oh, no, I got some color here on the cloak again. We can darken this later on with a wash if we choose to. I'm painting his sleeves like this as well. And it was very common at the time to wear these woolen tunics, even for someone who is highborn, such as King Alfred. Okay, something like this would do quite well. With this one said, before we go into the facial details, we're going to go and paint his sword scabbard, and that's going to stand out quite a bit because of the mono colors. And for this one, I'm choosing red leather for a leather scabbard. If you have any ideas of how to paint this otherwise, please let me know in the comments below. I really appreciate it. Any comment that I can get, even just a thank you, or I like this video, or I don't like the video, I appreciate that, so I can learn from it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel until now, I really would appreciate clicking the subscribe button, so you can get more content like this and about other board games and miniatures with miniature figures, and learn how to paint a little bit. And for those of you who are already subscribing, I want to say a big thank you to all of you, because you are the community that makes this channel grow. So thank you so much to all of you. So with this one, I'm applying it neat. You can apply it with a thin layer if you like to, either by Lamy medium or a medium in it, or just a drop of water. Here I'm taking great care to not touch what I just painted in green grey. Also taking care not to touch the sword hilt and handguard. Making sure there's no primer left. I may have to angle the figure a little bit. I'll show you here. There's a little bit of white sliver here. Something like this. It will take a little bit longer to dry this one because it's not a contrast paint. But it will do quite nicely, I think. I'm putting this one down, I'm cleaning my brush. And let's look at Odda here, see if it's getting to dry. Oh, it's drying quite nicely, drying quite fast. Looking at it's Alfred as well. So let's turn our attention to Alfred's hair. For his hair, it's kind of like a dark hair, so I'm using Rhinox Hide from Citadel. Giving it a good shake. But I'm switching my brush to a smaller brush, a size 0, to make sure I don't cover any of his facial details unnecessarily. I'm using this one neat. And since I wear glasses, I'm going to take off my glasses right now to make sure that I know exactly what I'm painting. And Last Kingdom, the board game, was on Kickstarter, and it was successfully founded. And now you can buy Last Kingdom, the board game, with these miniatures on Gamelyn Games website. And there's a link to the description below, where you can also find a list of all the paints I use in this video. He also has a little bit of a beard, and the beard I'm going to add a little bit later after I apply the face paint. I'm going to go back and putting this down. I'm taking care now, trying not to cover his crown here as well. That's why you see some of the paint still. There's still some white primer there. Now obviously I cannot make the figure look entirely exactly like the picture, but if I can get it slightly like the picture, I'm quite happy. Something like this would be sufficient. Putting that down, leaving it time to dry, turning my attention to Odda. And Odda has a greyish colour to his hair, but I'm going to turn my attention first and foremost. He also has a short beard, a short goatee. I'm going to turn my attention now entirely to the hands, and for the hands I'm going to use a colour called Speedpaint, Crusader skin from Armor Painter. Giving it a good shake as well. It has a metal ball in the bottom of the paint pot. That's why you hear this kind of like metal slapping, to make sure that the paints can be mixed easily. Sorry. And that's a really good way to make sure that the paints don't dry as well. It also has these nice dropper bottles. And I'm going to go over the whole face with this one. Leaving it entirely to pool in the eyes. And you can see kind of like where the beard goes. And some of the hair is in the back. Of course, a little bit underneath the chin as well. And of course, for the hands, the same thing. Looking quite okay already. On the back of the neck as well. Leaving a little bit back on the head to paint his hair and beard later on. Looking something like this. going to turn our attention right now to King Alfred again, doing the same thing, and gives it a nice way for you to also see exactly what we're doing. The point here is to, or at least my intention here, going to his hands as well, is to create a good video so you can see nice and easy steps for you to follow as you're painting along yourself. Alfred also has a short beard and a moustache, which I'm going to cover later on in the details. Here I covered a little bit by mistake some of the green-grey, which I can fix later on as well, once this one is dry. So I'm putting this one to the side. And now, since the green-grey is almost entirely dry, let's check, yes, it's dry. We're going to turn our attention to darken it a little bit. I'm going to use a, not surface primer, sorry about that. That was not that one. Ah, yeah. It was Vallejo Black Shade. I'm using it neat. No, sorry about that. I'm using about some water here as well. Bring this one close to it so we can actually do it. I want a very thin wash. So using about 1 part wash and about 5 parts water. So make sure the wash is very, very thin. Because I just want the folds here to show. And you wanted to pull on, not on the flat surfaces, but you wanted to pull on all the nooks and crannies here. So if you feel that it's pooling here in the surf, in the top, in the end, just soak it up with a bit of with a clean brush. So that's the wash part. I'll see here if this one's dry. Yeah, it is quite dry. We can also wash the sword scabbard with some Agrix Earth Shade from Vallejo. From Citadel. And you also want shade his hair like that. The hair is quite an optional part, but I can find that it's quite nice. Now, when the wash stage is mostly done, which is a very easy step for this model, we are now going to turn our attention to, it's almost dry, so let's turn our attention to Alfred instead. Back to Alfred. Yep, he is after all king, so he should get that preferential treatment. So we're going to do a dry brush of his cloak with Citadel's colours Mephiston Red. And if you haven't dry brushed before, it means that you simply take an old brush or a dry brush that I have for this specific purpose and soak it in paint. Close the paint pot, of course, and then you take a kitchen wrap and wipe off most of the paint, so you're left with very little paint, looking very like this. That's what you're aiming for. Putting it back over here, and you brush it over the surface areas here. It helps blend the cloak together and make sure that it's like the cloak looks fairly even. You want to move it around, seeing what I'm doing here. It looks something like this. And once you dry brush like this, you can apply another layer with Evil Sunz Scarlet, which is a light tone, and doing the same thing as I showed you before, giving a slightly brighter look. And here you want to focus on the upturn areas. Leaving some of the shadows in between. And this is a very easy highlight. You can do this manually as well, by painting the cloak manually. And then you focus on the raised areas only, leaving kind of like a flowing pattern of red on his cloak. Something like this. And that takes care of his cloak. Now, we haven't painted the sword scabbard yet, and his face is not entirely dry yet, so we're going to turn our attention to that one. Of course, we'll clean the brush for this one, making sure that we're going to use the same technique for Odda, the elder, when his blue cloak is dried, but with the blue color, of course. And then I'm going to take some Chainmail Silver for his sword hilt. Sword, oh, I went out something like that there. Something that happens. Sometimes that happens. Applying it neat, but just across the guard of the sword. Like that. And then, of course, cleaning the brush. Some gold for the sword hilt, which I said before, which should have said sword guard for, or hand guard for the silver, and sword hilt, which is gold, which is a royal color. Oh, that was my watch telling me to get up. Also, he has a brooch over here. Can also be painted gold. And of course, now we're going to turn our attention to the crown as well. I'm going to turn it up here so you can see. Turning it around, it's a bit tricky. And the reason I'm putting it a little bit up here is that he has a little bit on the card art. It's going a little bit up over his forehead. That's why it's not a mistake, it's just looking at the card art. So now it looks quite okay. We can fix the face and, of course, the beard in a little bit as well. Now, Odda doesn't have any gold on him, so that's the gold colour done, mostly, I think, yeah. Oh, he might actually have something. And let's go back to his hair and now his beard. Back to the original Rhinox Hide. And he has a little bit of see here if we can get the moustache right here as well. Something like this. Looking quite okay. Not perfect in any way. And when this one is dried, we can adjust the mistake I made on the crown here as well. We can put King Alfred to side, leave him to rest. He rested a lot in the series books and as well towards the end, especially. That's a small spoiler. Odda, turn our attention to his beard and small piece of hair. I'm going to use a very light grey called Wolf Grey from Vallejo's game color range. And that's what I thought. Also he has a moustache. It's hard to get here. But it's cool. Once you get it, it's really, really nice to get it done. Using small brush strokes. Letting it blend in with his goatee. You can get it done. And you can also paint his eyebrows here as well. Something like this. A little bit more on the eyebrows. Now I'm going into details here, but something like this. I'm quite pleased with that look. And now we're going to turn our attention to his blue cloak, which looks a little bit too worn for my taste. And we are going to dry brush it, like I said before, and closing the cork of the Wolf Grey. And we're going to use you can use one or two things. You can use Kantor Blue from Citadel, or you can use Royal Blue from Vallejo. I'm going to start with Kantor Blue, give it a good shake, and apply it with the same technique as used before with the dry brush of King Alfred's cloak. Like, wipe it off most of the color. I'm using a heavier dry brush for this one because it's a darker cloak. I'm using it only on the outer cloak here as well, by the way. Blending it nice and easy again. It's very, very dark on the card art, which makes it much easier. Okay, now And for the inner cloak, I'm going to use royal blue from Vallejo. Putting that here on top, giving it slight tonal variation. It's a much lighter blue as well, as you might notice. But it gives a nice hint to it. That's the darker blue. And I realized I just forgot to turn on the light here as well. My mistake. So this is this one. Maybe that's why you couldn't see. My apologies for that. And so now this is what it looks like. Hopefully this video has turned out to be okay for you as well. This is what King Alfred looks like. Again, my deepest apologies for this. I'm going to leave the cloak here as it is, as I turned my attention away from Odda. After all, King Alfred is the king. And I'm going to try to fix his face a little bit more, and his crown. He doesn't like when his crown is messed up. So I'm going to fix his crown first, going over to the gold. Something like this. And of course fixing the sword here as well. Now, there are some stitches on both models, kind of like buttons holding up the cloak. We'll see what we can do about those. But first, let's turn our attention a little bit more to the face. And we're going to do some Cadian Fleshtone to blend in together from Citadel. You can also use Kislev Flesh if you like, if you want him to have a more lighter look. So we'll start this way with his hands and repairing any mistakes here we made along the way. And the face, focusing on the chins and the nose ridge, and leaving the eyes shaded from the original speed paint. Here you go. Odda is rather pale, so I'm leaving him like this as per the card art. But I will actually touch up his fingers a little bit because they were touched by the blue. As well as his, where I accidentally touched with the beard. And the hair. I will actually accentuate maybe his nose a little bit more and his cheeks. See where the speed paint pulled, and I don't want it to pull there. Alright, quite pleased with that look. Now he does actually have some white parts over here that I haven't covered. I'm going to do that with another blue, with the royal blue color from closing this pot first. So I'm going to use some pure royal blue for his buttons and cloaks on the cloak. Just for the tonal variation here. some pure blue here. There we go. And there are some still white parts here, which I'm going to go back to using some pure Citadel Sky. Sorry, some pure Kantor Blue for this one. Which also gives a nice way of highlighting his wrists here. And you can also use this to highlight the crevices here, the folds, as well as up here. Small manual highlight, as well as the highlight up here on his hood. And his lower folds of the cloak. All right, blends in quite nicely. Now Odda is done, besides from the base, so I'm leaving here to the side. King Alfred has a few more details to go, mostly on the sword as well as on his cloak. So his face is mostly done. We're going to go back to the original green-grey here and cover up any mistakes here. We can also highlight his sleeves here. What's original? As well as highlighting the raised areas. And anywhere we can actually see where the red actually spilled over. Such as over here. And here. And I'm going to actually I'm going to highlight these ones as well. They're kind of like buttons in the same original color. It's a very small effect on this one. And for the sword, I'm going to give it some, because when the wash is almost dry, I'm going to give it some gold. Small gold highlights. Also entirely optional. Here, and also the gold for the here in the end. You do see also we missed one small part, and we're going to go back to the original red leather. And that's the belt where the sword actually hangs into, which is here. There you go, like this thing here. Now, since the figure I think is quite done, looks quite nice, we're going to turn our attention to the base. You can use any basing material you like, but in this case I'm going to use some Rhinox Hide for some very basic brown. Taking great care, of course, not to touch the model itself. Something like this. Back as well. There we go. And same thing for Odda. Odda the Elder. Covers up all the blue paint that's spilled on the base. And there we go. So I'm going to put this one down here, clean my brush. Putting some stuff here to the side, and you can see here that this is what we have. We're putting the king up here because they are both part of the same Wessex alliance. If you like this video, please don't hesitate to like, share and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.